The vastness of space stretched endlessly before humanity, a canvas of stars and silence. For decades, Earth had been listening, sending out probes, satellites, and signals in hopes of finding life beyond its borders. But all they ever heard was static. Until now. On board the orbital research station Aegis, Dr. Ilara Voss leaned closer to her console, her eyes narrowing at the faint blip on the screen. It wasn't random noise or cosmic interference. It was deliberate. A pattern. Her heart raced as she adjusted the frequency, isolating the signal. This is real, she whispered, almost afraid to believe it herself. The message repeated every few minutes, like a broken record calling for help. It wasn't in any human language, but that didn't stop Ilara. As one of Earth's top xenolinguists, decoding alien communication was her specialty. She worked tirelessly, running algorithms and cross-referencing tones with known mathematical constants. Hours passed before fragments began to emerge. "Help us," the translation read. Then came more words, chaotic, fragmented, yet chillingly clear. "They come. Destroy everything." Light fades. Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. Whoever sent this message was desperate, their voice trembling with fear and exhaustion. She forwarded the data to Admiral Cal Rourke, commander of Earth's newly unified war fleet. Humanity had only recently banded together under a single banner after centuries of division, and the fleet stood as proof of what unity could achieve. Still, no one expected their first mission to involve something like this. Admiral Rourke sat in his quarters aboard the flagship Eclipse Vanguard, staring at the decoded message. His weathered face betrayed little emotion, but inside, he wrestled with doubt. Was this some kind of trap? Or was it genuine? A cry for help from beings who might not even look like humans. He tapped his fingers against the desk, weighing the risks. If they ignored the signal, they'd never know what happened. If they responded and it turned out to be hostile, they could endanger all of Earth. Yet, if they acted and saved lives, it could mark humanity's arrival on the galactic stage, not as conquerors, but as protectors. "Sir," called Lieutenant Theo Calder, interrupting his thoughts. "We've triangulated the origin point. It's coming from a system near the edge of explored space." Rourke nodded, standing up. "Prepare the fleet. We're going." News spread quickly through the crew. Some were excited, others nervous. Among them was Captain Mira Solis, leader of the ground operations team. She tightened her gloves as she reviewed the mission briefing. "Whatever we find," she muttered to herself, "it won't be easy." Days later, the fleet arrived at the source of the signal, a desolate planet orbiting a dying red star. Its surface was scarred with craters and ruins, evidence of a once thriving civilization now reduced to dust. Drones scanned the area, picking up faint energy readings beneath the ground. Something, or someone, was still alive down there. As the team prepared to land, Admiral Rourke addressed the crew over the comms. "This isn't just about us anymore," he said firmly. "We're here because someone reached out when they had nowhere else to turn. Let's make sure we don't let them down." No one knew what awaited them below, but one thing was certain. The signal had changed everything. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and whether friend or foe, the truth lay buried in the shadows of that ruined world. The landing party descended onto the shattered planet with caution. The air was thin, barely breathable even with their advanced suits, and the ground beneath them was a jagged mosaic of blackened rock and metallic debris. Captain Mira Solis led the team, her boots crunching against the uneven surface as she scanned the horizon. The ruins stretched endlessly, like the skeletal remains of a once great empire. "This place feels wrong," muttered Lieutenant Theo Calder, his voice crackling over the comms. He adjusted the visor of his helmet, trying to make sense of the eerie silence that hung over the landscape. There were no winds, no signs of life, just an oppressive stillness that weighed heavily on everyone. "Focus, Lieutenant," Mira replied sharply. "We're here for answers, not chills." Drone scouts fanned out ahead, their sensors picking up faint energy signatures emanating from underground structures. One drone hovered near what appeared to be the entrance to a bunker, a massive metal door partially buried under rubble. The symbol etched into its surface glowed faintly, pulsing with a dim blue light. "That's our target," Mira said, gesturing for the team to follow. They approached cautiously, weapons ready. As they neared the door, it began to shift, groaning as if awakened by their presence. Slowly, it slid open, revealing a dark passageway lined with glowing panels. Inside, the air was stale but surprisingly intact. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, images of towering spires, starships and beings with elongated limbs and radiant eyes. These must have been the creators of this world, the ones who sent the signal. But where were they now? The team moved deeper into the bunker until they reached a large chamber filled with holographic projectors. At the center stood a pedestal, its surface cracked but functional. Mira activated it, and a shimmering image flickered to life, an alien figure speaking in rapid, melodic tones. Dr. Elara Voss's translation software kicked in, overlaying subtitles in English. "We are the Luminaris," the figure began, its voice tinged with despair. "Our people thrived among the stars, building wonders beyond imagination. But we grew complacent, blind to the threat lurking in the void. The swarm came without warning, consuming everything in their path. They do not destroy, they assimilate, turning life into tools for their hive mind." The hologram shifted, showing scenes of devastation. Cities burned, ships exploded, and countless luminaries were dragged into shadowy cocoons, their forms dissolving into writhing masses of organic machinery. It was horrifying. "They took our worlds, our families, our hope," the figure continued. "We send this message to whoever finds it. Do not let them spread further. Stop them before it is too late." The recording ended abruptly, leaving the team in stunned silence. Mira clenched her fists, anger bubbling inside her. "These bastards wiped out an entire civilization," she growled. "And if we don't stop them, they'll do the same to us." Back aboard the Eclipse Vanguard, Admiral Rourke listened intently as Mira reported their findings. His jaw tightened as he studied the map embedded in the final moments of the hologram. It showed a distant star system marked with coordinates. "That's their last stronghold," Rourke said grimly. "If there are survivors, they'll be there. And if not—" He trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. The crew buzzed with tension. Some argued that pursuing the swarm would be reckless, while others believed it was their duty to intervene. Rourke didn't hesitate. "Set course for those coordinates," he ordered. "Whatever's waiting for us, we can't turn away now." As the fleet prepared to jump, a faint tremor rippled through space. A distortion detected by the ship's sensors. Something was following them. Whatever it wasn't friendly. Humanity had stepped into the unknown, and the shadows were closing in. The fleet jumped to the coordinates marked on the map, leaving behind the desolate ruins of the Luminaris homeworld. But as they emerged from the hyperspace corridor, tension crackled through the air like static electricity. The crew of the Eclipse Vanguard gathered in the command center, staring at the view screen that displayed a star system bathed in eerie red light. It was beautiful and foreboding. Admiral Cal Rourke stood at the forefront, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. His sharp eyes scanned the readings pouring in from the ship's sensors. "Anything unusual?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with caution. "Negative, sir," replied Lieutenant Theo Calder, manning the sensor station. "No signs of immediate threats. Just emptiness." But emptiness didn't mean safety. Everyone aboard knew the swarm could be lurking anywhere, hidden in the dark corners of space, or cloaked by technology far beyond human understanding. The thought made even seasoned officers uneasy. In the mess hall, whispers spread among the crew. Some believed they were walking into a trap. Others argued it was humanity's duty to help those who had reached out for aid. Captain Mira Solis sat alone at a table, picking at her food without appetite. She couldn't shake the images from the bunker, the glowing carvings, the desperate hologram, the horrifying visions of assimilation. What if they failed? What if the swarm found Earth next? Dr. Ilara Voss entered the room, carrying a datapad filled with notes. She slid into the seat across from Mira. "You look like you haven't slept," she said gently. "I haven't," Mira admitted, pushing her tray aside. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those things. The swarm. They're not just monsters. They're an extinction event waiting to happen." Ilara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And yet, we can't ignore them. If we turn away now, we're no better than the civilizations that abandoned the Luminaris." Mira sighed. "I know, but knowing doesn't make it easier." Meanwhile, in the war room, Admiral Rourke faced heated debate among his senior staff. Commander Elias Drake, head of tactical operations, slammed his fist on the table. "This is insane. We don't even know if there are survivors left. For all we know, this could be a lure to draw us into their territory." "And what if it's not?" countered Captain Zoralin, leader of the science division. "If there are Luminaris still alive, we owe it to them, and to ourselves, to try. Humanity has spent centuries looking for allies out here. Now we found one. Are we really going to walk away?" Rourke listened silently, weighing both sides. He understood Drake's concerns. Earth's fleet was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. Engaging the swarm could mean risking everything they'd built. Yet something about the Luminaris Plea resonated with him. Their desperation reminded him of humanity's own struggles during its darkest days, when nations fought each other instead of standing united. Finally, he spoke. "We go," he declared firmly. "Not because it's safe, but because it's right. If we abandon these people, then what does that say about us? About who we are?" His decision silenced the room. While some looked relieved, others exchanged worried glances. Drake scowled but said nothing, retreating to his post to prepare for whatever lay ahead. Hours later, as the fleet approached the edge of the system, alarms blared throughout the ships. A faint energy signature had appeared on the scanners, something moving fast, heading straight for them. "What is it?" Rourke demanded, striding back to the bridge. "It's unknown, sir," Calder replied, his fingers flying over the console. "It's small, faster than anything we've seen before. Could be a probe or a scout." Before anyone could react, the object came into view. A battered alien vessel limping through space, its hull scorched and pockmarked with damage. Emergency signals flashed weakly from its core. "Survivors," Mira whispered, her heart pounding. Rourke hesitated only briefly before issuing the order. "Tractor beam online. Bring them aboard." As the mysterious ship docked, the crew braced themselves for what, or who, they might find inside. Humanity's journey into the stars had begun with hope, but now it carried the weight of survival. And somewhere in the shadows, the swarm watched, waiting for its moment to strike. The battered alien vessel was brought into the hangar bay of the Eclipse Vanguard, its damaged hull sparking faintly as engineers worked to stabilize it. The crew gathered around, weapons drawn but held low, unsure what, or who, they would find inside. Admiral Cal Rourke stood at the front, his face unreadable but his mind racing with possibilities. This was humanity's first real encounter with an alien species outside of ruins and recordings. It could change everything. Captain Mira Solis led a small team toward the ship's airlock, her pulse rifle ready but pointed downward. "Stay sharp," she muttered over the comms. "We don't know if they're friendly." The airlock hissed open, revealing a dim interior filled with smoke and flickering lights. Slowly, figures emerged, 3 aliens, their elongated limbs trembling under the weight of exhaustion. Their skin shimmered faintly, like liquid metal catching the light, and their large, luminous eyes darted nervously between the humans surrounding them. One of them stepped forward, raising a hand in what seemed to be a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," came a strained voice through a translator device strapped to the alien's chest. Its words were halting, broken, but clear enough to understand. "We are Luminaris." Dr. Ilara Voss rushed forward, her scientific curiosity overpowering caution. "You're alive," she exclaimed, lowering her weapon completely. "We thought your people were gone." The lead alien nodded weakly. "Most are. Lost. Assimilated." He introduced himself as Silas Arden, once a general of the Luminaris resistance against the swarm. His voice carried both sorrow and determination. "We sent the signal. Did you receive it?" "Yes," Rourke replied, stepping closer. "And we've come to help. Tell us what happened." Silas hesitated, glancing at his companions before speaking. "The swarm does not destroy. It consumes. They take life forms, technology, culture, everything. What remains is twisted into tools for their hive mind. We fought for centuries, but they overwhelmed us. Now only fragments of our people survive." As Silas spoke, the crew listened intently, their expressions shifting from awe to horror. Lieutenant Theo Calder clenched his fists tightly, imagining Earth facing such a fate. "How do we stop them?" he asked, his voice tight with emotion. "You cannot fight them alone," Silas said bluntly. "Their numbers are endless, their strength unmatched. But together," he paused, looking directly at Rourke, "together, there may still be hope." Rourke exchanged glances with Captain Solis and Dr. Voss. The decision weighed heavily on him. Helping the Luminaris meant committing Earth's fleet to a war that spanned galaxies, a war they barely understood. Yet abandoning them felt unthinkable. "Take us to your stronghold," Rourke finally said. "Show us how we can fight back." Silas nodded gratefully, though his expression remained grim. "It will not be easy. The swarm knows where we hide. They will come for us. And now for you." Over the next few hours, the survivors were given medical care and food while engineers worked to repair their ship. Conversations began between humans and Luminaris, tentative but meaningful. Bonds started forming, especially between Lieutenant Calder and one of the refugees, Zinara, a warrior who had lost her family to the swarm. Despite their differences, they found common ground in shared grief and resolve. But not everyone trusted humanity. Some Luminaris whispered among themselves, questioning whether allying with outsiders would bring salvation or destruction. Silas silenced them firmly. "They answered our call when no one else did," he reminded them. "We owe them our lives, and perhaps our future." As preparations continued, Admiral Rourke addressed his crew. "This mission has changed," he said, his tone resolute. "We're not just explorers anymore. We're defenders. And if we succeed, we won't just save the Luminaris. We'll protect Earth too." The fleet set course for the Luminaris stronghold, guided by Silas's coordinates. Behind them, the battered refugee ship followed, a symbol of resilience amidst despair. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also the promise of unity. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again. The journey to the Luminaris stronghold was tense and silent, save for the hum of engines and occasional updates from the navigation team. Admiral Kell Rourke paced the bridge of the Eclipse Vanguard, his mind racing with possibilities. Silas Arden had described the stronghold as a sanctuary, a place where the remnants of his people clung to survival, but also as a target. If the swarm discovered their location, it would mean certain annihilation. As they approached the coordinates, the fleet entered an asteroid field so dense it seemed impossible to navigate. Rocks of all sizes floated in chaotic orbits, some glowing faintly with mineral deposits, others jagged and dark like teeth waiting to tear through metal hulls. Lieutenant Theo Calder adjusted the sensors, guiding the ships carefully through narrow gaps. "This must be how they've stayed hidden," he muttered. "No one could find this place without knowing exactly where to look." Finally, the scanners picked up something unusual, a massive asteroid with unnatural grooves carved into its surface. It looked like a natural formation at first glance, But closer inspection revealed docking ports and defensive turrets concealed within the rock. A signal flashed on the comms. "Welcome, survivors. You are clear to dock." Inside the asteroid, the fleet found itself in a sprawling underground city. The walls shimmered with bioluminescent panels, casting soft blue light over wide corridors bustling with activity. Refugees moved about, their movements hurried yet purposeful. Children peeked curiously at the human visitors, while elders watched silently, their luminous eyes filled with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Silas led the crew to meet High Matriarch Lyria, the leader of the Luminaris resistance. She stood tall despite her frail appearance, her voice steady as she greeted Admiral Rourke. "You have come far to answer our plea," she said, inclining her head slightly. "For that, we are grateful." Rourke nodded respectfully. "We couldn't ignore your call for help, but time is short. We need to prepare for the swarm's arrival." Lyria's expression hardened. "They know we are here. Our scouts report increased activity near the edge of the system. They will strike soon." She gestured toward holographic displays showing the swarm's movements, clusters of ships moving ominously closer. Dr. Ilara Voss stepped forward, eager to contribute. "Your technology is incredible. Combined with ours, we might stand a chance." Over the next few days, humans and Luminaris worked side by side to fortify the stronghold. Engineers merged Earth's advanced weaponry with Luminaris energy systems, creating hybrid defenses unlike anything either species had seen before. Captain Mira Solis coordinated ground teams, teaching Luminaris warriors new combat tactics while learning from their centuries of experience fighting the swarm. Despite these efforts, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Some Luminaris questioned whether humanity's involvement would make things worse. "You bring attention to us," one elder accused during a heated meeting. "The swarm may not have known you existed until now." Admiral Rourke met the accusation head-on. "If the swarm is coming anyway, wouldn't you rather face them with allies than alone?" His words silenced the room, though not everyone looked convinced. Amidst the chaos, personal connections began to form. Lieutenant Calder spent hours talking with Zenara, sharing stories of Earth and listening intently as she spoke of her lost family. Their bond grew stronger each day, bridging the gap between two vastly different worlds. As preparations neared completion, Admiral Rourke called a final briefing. Standing before both human and Luminaris leaders, he spoke with unwavering determination. "We don't know what tomorrow brings, but I do know this. We fight together, not just for survival, but for hope." Outside, the asteroid field remained eerily quiet, hiding the storm that loomed on the horizon. The swarm was coming, and when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. The days leading up to the swarm's arrival were a blur of activity. Engineers worked around the clock, welding metal plates onto ships and calibrating hybrid weapon systems. Soldiers drilled tirelessly, practicing maneuvers that combined human precision with Luminaris agility. Yet, despite their shared goal, cracks began to form in the fragile alliance between humanity and the Luminaris. Admiral Kel Rourke noticed it first during a joint training exercise. A group of Luminaris warriors clashed with Captain Mira Solis over strategy, their voices rising in frustration. "Your methods are too rigid," one of them snapped, his shimmering skin flickering with agitation. "You think in straight lines, but the swarm does not move that way. And your unpredictability leaves us exposed." Solis shot back, her hands clenched into fists. "We need structure if we're going to hold our ground." Rourke stepped in before the argument escalated further. "Enough," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't about who's right. It's about survival. If we can't work together now, we won't stand a chance against the swarm." But the disagreements didn't stop there. In the engineering bay, Dr. Ilara Voss struggled to bridge cultural differences as well. The Luminaris engineers viewed Earth's technology as crude compared to their elegant energy-based designs, while some human technicians dismissed the aliens' reliance on organic components as impractical. When a prototype weapon malfunctioned during testing, tempers flared. "This is why we shouldn't mix our tech," shouted Chief Engineer Harris, throwing down his tools. "It's unstable. It failed because you refused to listen to our advice," retorted Lion, a Luminaris engineer, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Your machines cannot adapt like ours." Before the situation could spiral out of control, Lieutenant Theo Calder intervened. He had been working closely with Zenara, and their growing friendship gave him insight into both sides. "Listen to each other," he urged, stepping between them. "We're stronger when we combine what works from both worlds. Blaming each other won't stop the swarm." His words seemed to calm the room, but the underlying mistrust lingered. Even among the crew of the Eclipse Vanguard, doubts spread. Some whispered that allying with the Luminaris was a mistake, that humanity should focus on defending Earth instead of risking everything for an alien race. Others argued that abandoning the Luminaris now would make them no better than the swarm itself. Amidst the chaos, personal stories emerged that began to mend the fractures. One evening, after hours of grueling drills, Lieutenant Calder sat with Zenara near the stronghold's observation deck. They stared out at the asteroid field, its jagged rocks illuminated by distant stars. "I lost my brother in the swarm's first attack," Zenara admitted quietly, her voice trembling. "He fought bravely, but I couldn't save him." She paused, looking at Calder. "And you? What drives you?" Calder hesitated, then spoke of his past failures, how he'd once frozen under pressure during a mission, costing lives. "I'm here because I want to prove I can do better," he confessed. "For them. For everyone counting on us." Their shared vulnerability forged a deeper connection, one that inspired others around them. Slowly, small acts of kindness began to chip away at the barriers between species. A human medic stayed late to treat a wounded Luminaris soldier. An elder taught young cadets about the history of the Luminaris resistance, earning their respect. Even Admiral Rourke found solace in unexpected places. During a quiet moment, High Matriarch Lyria approached him. "You carry the weight of your people on your shoulders," she observed gently. "Do not let it crush you. Trust in those around you. They will rise to meet this challenge." Her words struck a chord. Rourke realized he couldn't shoulder the burden alone. Leadership meant trusting others to share the load. As the final preparations neared completion, the fleet gathered for a ceremony to honor fallen comrades, both human and Luminaris. Torches were lit, casting flickering light across solemn faces. Admiral Rourke addressed the crowd, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Tomorrow, we face the swarm. But tonight, we remember why we fight, not just for ourselves, but for every life they've taken, and every life we refuse to lose." The unity wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Together, they stood ready to face whatever horrors awaited them beyond the asteroid field. Hope burned bright, even in the shadow of impending doom. The calm before the storm shattered without warning. Alarms blared across the stronghold, jolting everyone awake. Lieutenant Theo Calder bolted upright in his bunk, heart pounding as he grabbed his gear and rushed to the command center. The view screens showed the nightmare they had been dreading. The swarm had arrived. Thousands of ships poured into the asteroid field like a swarm of insects, their forms shifting and pulsating unnaturally. They weren't machines. They were living organisms fused with technology, writhing masses of tendrils and metallic carapaces that glinted menacingly under the dim light of the dying star. Each vessel seemed to pulse with a sickly green glow, as if alive and hungry. Admiral Cal Rourke stood at the helm of the Eclipse Vanguard, his jaw clenched tightly. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered over the comms. "Prepare for engagement." Captain Mira Solis led ground teams to defensive positions within the asteroid, fortifying corridors and setting traps designed to slow the swarm's advance. Her voice was steady but urgent as she coordinated efforts. "We hold them here. No retreat." Dr. Ilara Voss worked alongside Luminaris engineers, monitoring the hybrid weapons systems. "Pulse cannons online," she reported, her fingers flying over the console. Let's hope this works. As the first wave of swarm ships entered firing range, the fleet unleashed its full arsenal. Missiles streaked through space, exploding against the organic hulls of the enemy vessels. Plasma beams cut through the darkness, slicing apart smaller drones. For a moment, it seemed like humanity's advanced weaponry might give them an edge. But the swarm adapted quickly. Damaged ships merged with others, healing themselves almost instantly. Larger vessels released swarms of smaller drones, overwhelming Earth's fighters. Worse still, some ships began latching onto asteroids, burrowing into the rock with terrifying speed. "They're breaching the outer layers," shouted Lieutenant Calder from his station. "They'll be inside within minutes." Silas Arden appeared on the bridge, his expression grim. "They always find a way in. We must hold them back long enough to evacuate civilians." Rourke hesitated only briefly before issuing orders. "Solis, get those people to safety. Everyone else, prepare for close-quarters combat." Inside the asteroid, chaos erupted as the swarm broke through. Their soldiers, twisted amalgamations of flesh and metal, poured into the corridors, moving with eerie coordination. Human and liminary forces fought side by side, using every weapon at their disposal. Pulse rifles crackled, energy blades hummed, and grenades detonated in bursts of searing light. Zenera fought fiercely beside Calder, her movements fluid and precise. Together, they held off a group of swarm soldiers attempting to flank their position. "Stay close," she yelled, slashing one creature with her blade while Calder fired at another. Despite their efforts, the swarm pushed forward relentlessly. In one corridor, Silas led a desperate last stand, buying time for refugees to escape. His body shimmered faintly as he activated an ancient luminaris artifact, a device capable of emitting a powerful electromagnetic pulse. "Go," he shouted to the retreating humans and luminaris. "I'll hold them here." "No," Zenera screamed, trying to reach him, but Calder held her back. "He's giving us a chance," he said softly. "We can't waste it." With a deafening roar, the artifact detonated, flooding the area with blinding energy. The swarm forces disintegrated, but so did Silas. Silence fell briefly, broken only by the sound of distant explosions echoing through the stronghold. Back aboard the Eclipse Vanguard, Admiral Rourke watched grimly as reports poured in. The swarm had breached multiple points, forcing the fleet to split its focus between defending the asteroid and protecting evacuating civilians. Losses mounted rapidly, and morale wavered. Yet amid the carnage, there were moments of brilliance. A daring strike team led by Captain Solis managed to disable a swarm mothership, crippling its ability to coordinate attacks. Dr. Voss recalibrated the pulse cannons mid-battle, finding a frequency that temporarily disrupted the swarm's hive-mind connection. "We're not done yet," Rourke declared, rallying what remained of his crew. "Not while we still draw breath." The battle raged on, brutal and unrelenting. Humanity and the Luminaris bled together, united in their defiance. And though victory seemed distant, their resistance burned brightly, a beacon of hope in the face of annihilation. The battle hung precariously in the balance, a deadly dance between survival and annihilation. The swarm pressed forward with relentless ferocity, their numbers seemingly endless, while humanity and the Luminaris fought desperately to hold them at bay. Admiral Cal Rourke stood on the bridge of the Eclipse Vanguard, his eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding around him. Every decision felt like it carried the weight of extinction. "We're losing ground too fast," Lieutenant Theo Calder reported grimly, his voice strained as he analyzed the data flooding into his console. "Their drones are overwhelming us inside the asteroid. If we don't do something soon, they'll breach the inner sanctum." Dr. Ilara Voss overheard from her station nearby and turned sharply. Her face was pale but determined. "There has to be a way to exploit their biology. Their organic components. They must have vulnerabilities." Rourke nodded sharply. "Find me one. Now." Ilara dove into the research archives, combing through every scrap of information they had gathered about the swarm. Hours earlier, she'd noticed faint irregularities in how the swarm reacted to certain energy frequencies during skirmishes. It wasn't much, but it was a clue. Working alongside Zanara, who contributed insights from centuries of Luminaris resistance tactics, Ilara ran simulations until finally a breakthrough emerged. They're vulnerable to specific electromagnetic pulses, she announced breathlessly, rushing back to the command center. It disrupts their neural connections, their hive mind. We can use this against them. Work wasted no time. Engineers, retrofit the pulse cannons immediately. Load every ship capable of firing them. The crew sprang into action. Engineers scrambled across the fleet, modifying weapon systems under extreme pressure. Captain Mira Solis coordinated efforts aboard the asteroid, ensuring that defensive positions were fortified enough to buy time for the modifications to complete. Meanwhile, Zanara led strike teams deeper into the tunnels, slowing the swarm's advance with guerrilla tactics and improvised traps. As the first retrofitted ships came online, Admiral Work formulated a bold plan. "We need to draw them out," he said, pointing to a holographic map of the battlefield. "Lure their main forces into an ambush where we can hit them with everything we've got." Lieutenant Calder frowned. "That's risky, sir. If they break through our lines, it's our only shot." Rourke interrupted firmly. "Trust me." The fleet executed the maneuver flawlessly. Smaller vessels baited the swarm toward open space, feigning retreat. The enemy took the bait, surging forward in pursuit. As the swarm converged, the Eclipse Vanguard and its escorts unleashed the newly calibrated pulse cannons. Bright arcs of electromagnetic energy tore through space, striking the swarm fleet like lightning bolts. The effect was devastating. Ships convulsed violently as their organic components spasmed uncontrollably. Drones fell lifeless, drifting aimlessly in the void. For the first time since the battle began, the tide shifted. Humanity and the Luminaris seized the opportunity, launching counterattacks with renewed vigor. Inside the asteroid, the pulse waves reverberated through the tunnels, crippling the swarm soldiers still advancing. Refugees cheered as the invaders faltered, giving ground for the first time. Zanara stood atop a pile of fallen enemies, her blade glowing faintly in the dim light. "This is it," she shouted to her comrades. "Push them back." But victory came at a cost. Many ships were lost in the daring maneuver, including several brave pilots who sacrificed themselves to ensure the swarm stayed within range of the pulse cannons. Among them was Captain Solis, whose final act involved ramming her damaged fighter into a swarm mothership, buying precious seconds for reinforcements to arrive. Back aboard the flagship, Admiral Rourke bowed his head briefly when news of Solis's death reached him. She had been a cornerstone of the mission, a leader whose courage inspired everyone around her. But there was no time to mourn. The fight wasn't over yet. On the view screen, the swarm regrouped, their remaining forces retreating into the depths of space. Though battered and broken, they weren't defeated. Not yet. "Secure the stronghold," Rourke ordered, his voice heavy but resolute. "Tend to the wounded, and prepare for whatever comes next." For now, they had won a reprieve, a chance to regroup and rebuild. But the scars of battle would linger, reminders of the sacrifices made to turn the tide. Hope burned brighter than ever, fueled by unity and resilience. Together, humanity and the Luminaries had proven that even in the darkest hour, defiance could shine like a star. The aftermath of the battle was a somber tableau. The asteroid stronghold, though saved from total destruction, bore deep scars. Charred walls, collapsed tunnels, and smoldering wreckage littered its once pristine corridors. Refugees huddled together in makeshift shelters, their faces etched with exhaustion and grief. For every life saved, another had been lost. The cost of victory weighed heavily on everyone. Admiral Kel Rourke walked through the damaged halls of the stronghold, his boots crunching against debris. He stopped briefly to speak with survivors, offering words of reassurance, but his own heart felt hollow. Captain Mira Solis's sacrifice haunted him. Her final transmission replayed in his mind. "Tell them, we held the line." She had given everything to protect those who couldn't fight for themselves, and her absence left a void no one could fill. In the medical bay, Lieutenant Theo Calder sat beside Zanara, both covered in soot and blood, not all of it theirs. They worked silently, tending to the wounded alongside medics from both species. Zanara stitched up a young Luminaris soldier, while Calder handed her supplies without needing to be asked. Their bond had grown stronger through shared loss. They didn't need words to understand each other's pain. "We've lost so many," Zanara murmured finally, tying off the last stitch. "Sometimes I wonder if this fight is worth it." Calder looked at her, his expression resolute despite the sorrow in his eyes. "It has to be. If we give up now, then everyone who died, Captain Solis, Silas, your family, they'll have done so for nothing. We owe it to them to keep going." Zanara nodded slowly, her shimmering skin dimming slightly as she processed his words. "You're right. But sometimes hope feels like carrying a mountain on your back." High Matriarch Lyria lay gravely injured in the intensive care unit, her frail body unable to withstand the strain of the battle. Before succumbing to her wounds, she summoned Admiral Work to her side. Her voice was weak, but clear as she addressed him one final time. "You've shown us what unity truly means," she said, her luminous eyes locking onto his. "Do not let fear divide you. Trust in each other, human and Luminaris alike. Only together can you face what lies ahead." With those parting words, Lyria passed away, leaving Zanara as the new leader of the Luminaris resistance. It was a burden she hadn't expected to bear, but she accepted it with quiet determination. Standing before the gathered survivors, she vowed to honor her people's legacy. "We will rebuild, and when the swarm returns, we will be ready." Meanwhile, aboard the Eclipse Vanguard, repairs were underway. Engineers worked tirelessly to patch up the fleet, welding hull breaches and replacing damaged systems. Morale among the crew remained fragile, but small acts of kindness helped mend spirits. Stories of heroism spread. How Chief Engineer Harris had stayed behind to stabilize a collapsing reactor. How Dr. Ilara Voss had risked her life to recalibrate the pulse cannons mid-battle. These tales reminded everyone why they fought. Dr. Voss herself found solace in data analysis, poring over readings from the battle. She discovered that the electromagnetic pulses had not only disrupted the swarm's hive mind, but also weakened their ability to regenerate. "This gives us an edge," she told Work during a debriefing. "If we refine the technology further, we might stand a real chance next time." Work nodded, though his thoughts drifted beyond tactics and strategies. He thought about Earth, the billions of lives depending on him to bring the fleet home safely. He thought about the sacrifices made here today and wondered if humanity was truly prepared for the galactic stage. Yet, as he gazed out at the stars through the viewport, he felt a flicker of resolve reignite within him. The swarm would return. That much was certain. But humanity and the Luminaris had proven something invaluable. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage and unity could turn despair into defiance. Together, they had forged a fragile alliance, one built on trust, sacrifice, and hope. As the fleet prepared to leave the asteroid stronghold, bound for Earth to regroup and plan their next move, Admiral Rourke addressed the crew one last time. "Today, we mourn our losses. Tomorrow, we rise again. Because giving up isn't an option, not for us, not for anyone counting on us. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with danger. But for now, amidst the ruins of war, a fragile light burned bright. A promise that survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about fighting for something greater than oneself." The journey back to Earth was quiet but heavy with reflection. The Eclipse Vanguard and its fleet carried not only survivors, but also the weight of everything they had endured. The lives lost, the sacrifices made, and the fragile hope that had emerged from the ashes of battle. For many aboard, the return felt bittersweet. They had faced the swarm and survived, but the scars ran deep. As the fleet approached Earth's orbit, Admiral Cal Rourke stood on the bridge, gazing at the blue-green planet growing larger in the view screen. It looked peaceful from afar, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. Yet he knew this peace was fragile. If humanity wanted to protect its home, and the stars beyond, it would need to adapt, grow stronger, and remain vigilant. The United Earth Council convened an emergency session upon their arrival. Leaders from every nation gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall, their faces a mix of awe and apprehension as Admiral Rourke delivered his report. Behind him stood Lieutenant Theo Calder, Dr. Ilara Voss, and Zanara, representing both human and luminarist forces. Their presence underscored the gravity of what they had achieved and the challenges yet to come. "We are no longer alone in the universe," Rourke began, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "We have seen the face of an enemy that does not distinguish between species or worlds. The swarm will stop at nothing to consume all life, but we have also forged an alliance with the luminaries, survivors of a once great civilization, who now stand beside us. Together, we have proven that unity can overcome even the darkest threats." His words resonated deeply. Applause broke out, though it was tempered by the knowledge that Earth's future depended on action, not just admiration. The Council unanimously approved funding for a new interstellar coalition, a joint effort between humanity and the luminaries to develop advanced defenses, share technology, and prepare for the inevitable return of the swarm. In the weeks that followed, construction began on a massive orbital defense platform named Sanctuary 1. Designed by combining human ingenuity with luminarist energy systems, it served as both a fortress and a symbol of cooperation. Engineers worked side by side, their differences fading as they focused on a shared goal. Meanwhile, diplomats negotiated treaties with other alien species scattered across nearby star systems, inviting them to join the coalition against the swarm. Zanara took up residence aboard the Eclipse Vanguard, working closely with Admiral Rourke and his crew. Her leadership inspired trust among her people, while her bond with Lieutenant Calder became a testament to the power of connection across species. Together, they trained new recruits, teaching them how to fight not just as individuals, but as part of a unified force. One evening, as the sun set over Earth's horizon, Rourke and Zanara stood together on the observation deck of the flagship. Below them, cities twinkled like constellations, a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. "You've changed us," Zanara said softly, breaking the silence. "Before you came, we were ready to give up. Now I believe we might actually win." Rourke smiled faintly, though his eyes remained serious. "It's not about winning or losing. It's about standing together when it matters most. That's what makes us strong." Far beyond the reaches of explored space, the swarm regrouped, its hive mind calculating, evolving, preparing for another assault. But humanity and the luminaries were no longer afraid. They had faced despair and risen above it. They had learned that survival wasn't enough. They sought something greater, a future where hope could thrive amidst the stars. As Sanctuary 1 powered up for the first time, its lights shining brightly against the void, Admiral Rourke addressed the assembled crew and allies one final time. "This isn't the end of our journey. It's the beginning. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Because that's who we are now. Not conquerors, not victims, but protectors." And so, under the watchful gaze of Earth and its newfound allies, humanity stepped boldly into the cosmos. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, they walked it unafraid.